Here's a fire that could be in any of our backyards. This shed could be any place. It could be in your jurisdiction, it could be in my jurisdiction, and it could be anywhere in the country. What's important or what's different about this shed? Nothing from the outside. It's the normal shed that you would expect to find, and the normal shed fire that you as the company officer would be called upon with your crew to put out, or as the fire investigator to do the origin and cause at. Looking at the shed from the exterior, there's not a whole lot of things to give you any indication as to what we have. We have some children's toys, we have some car parts, we have some debris, we have a small building with some contents inside, clothesline, propane tank, and the front of the shed has a window. We're going to take a walk now over to the front and take a look at the window. You can see as we move to the exterior of the building, there's not a significant amount of fire damage that extended out from the interior of the shed. What is apparent, though, if you look at the window glass closely, is that the window glass on the right side that is still intact has been painted over with a black colored spray paint. The window glass on the left side of the frame has voided as a result of the fire and dropped down. Looking in from the exterior, you can see the contents on the interior of the shed, and predominantly there's a propane tank with a piece of plastic tubing that immediately catches your eye. Looking at the exterior of the building, there's no flame communication from the interior of the structure to outside of the structure, and at this point in time, given the outside of the building and the conditions that are on the outside, you really don't have a good idea as to what took place inside. What we'll do now is we'll start moving towards the interior of the building to do our interior examination and see what the building contains. Here we are at the entranceway into the shed. Looking at the interior side of the door to the shed, there's no fire or smoke damage on the interior side of the door, a clear indication that the door was open at the time of the fire, also providing you with a clear indication that the fire had sufficient oxygen to burn and to grow. Looking at the outside of the door, there's a hasp and a padlock along with a throw bolt. Knowing whether or not this means anything right now is hard to tell, but taking note of the condition of the lock and the condition of the hasp cylinder can give you some idea as to the integrity of the building at a future point in your investigation. These are things that not only the fire investigator needs to know, but the company officer responding to the fire should also make himself aware of these conditions upon his arrival and as he's extinguishing the fire with his crew. We're going to open the door now and go inside. Looking at the contents as we enter the shed from the door, we see a few things of interest. We see an electric fan, obviously unplugged with no power source, cannot be a source of the fire's ignition. We see a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall directly above a steel garbage can which contains debris. Behind the garbage can is another piece of covering which looks to be some sort of material, possibly curtains that extended across the front window, which again is evidenced by the remains in the middle of the window. We now have a secondary set of devices used to obscure the interior of the shed from outside view. As you start to look at the contents of the garbage can, what comes to mind initially is that we have the remains of salt, we have the remains of antihistamine tablets, and we have another piece of that plastic tubing which I talked about when we looked through the front window towards the area of the propane tank. Whether or not those things mean anything to us at this point, it's hard to say, but it's things that we should take notice of, and if there's things that they could become evidence later on in our investigation. Don't overlook anything as you start to look. Taking the interior examination a little further into the interior of the structure, we see a large amount of Class A combustible debris located directly under the window. That debris consists of some cardboard boxes, and again, which on first examination looks like household garbage. An ordinary stuffed chair, which has been subject to fire damage. Looking at the chair, it appears that the fire that extended into the chair came to the chair as opposed to coming out of the chair and extending up into other portions of the building. As we start to move towards the front corner of the interior of the shed, we notice a few things that are a bit unusual. Some sort of aluminum foil or packaging materials inside this container, the remains of some sort of pills inside this container, the remains of some sort of plastic container or containers which have melted down to the top of the piece of furniture. Next to that is a coffee pot with a coffee filter inside and no evidence of any type of coffee. What does that mean? We don't know right now. Next to that piece of furniture is the gas can I talked about earlier with the piece of plastic tubing coming out of it. And now where the substantial fire inside the shed has taken place, the area of the top of this table. On top of this table are all items which appear to be either some sort of glass container, some sort of bowl, or, as we see in the corner, camping fuel. In addition to the camping fuel on top of the table, we see rolled paper towels which have burned up almost completely. We see a strainer with something inside of it over another glass jar, and we see a large quantity of white powder along the top of the table, in addition to a significant quantity of paper coffee filters in various types of jars, mason jars, a crock pot, and other type of vessels. Looking to the crock pot, we see that the crock pot is plugged into the electrical supply. Our examination of the electricity within the structure, when we undertake that later on in the investigation, will reveal that the electrical components are functioning properly, show no evidence of arcing or shorting, and are eliminated as to the origin or the cause of the fire. Moving over to the small table, what immediately catches your eye is the 3 lithium batteries in the jar, along with, again, more coffee filters stuffed inside, another mason jar, and other vessels containing various liquids or powdery residue. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a small storage shed that contains a large amount of items not associated with anything we saw on the outside. There's no children's toys, there's no car parts, there's really no hardware or tools. There's all different types of containers, vessels, paper products, fuel, and the remains of some sort of packaging for medicines. What are we looking at here? We're looking at a methamphetamine processing laboratory that has been involved in a flash fire. This methamphetamine processing laboratory can be anywhere, and unfortunately with this fire comes a significant degree of hazards, not only to the firefighter responding to it, but to the fire investigator who's called to this scene to investigate the origin and cause of this fire. Should you encounter a fire like this in your jurisdiction, you should immediately contact the methamphetamine laboratory unit of your state police, your county sheriff, or your local law enforcement and request their immediate assistance in processing this fire investigation, as it's apparent through what we've seen here, this is not only a fire, it's a crime scene. I'm Buddy Kales. Thanks for watching.